Hello, you're welcome. You're welcome onto my channel today, and it gives me great joy to observe you are viewing this video. Hi, I'm Dr. Olayinka Kwale. I'm a lecturer in the university. I'm a sociologist. I'm a researcher. On this channel, I do a number of stuff, but all the stuff I do, you can easily cluster them into four: sociology, research, relationship, and migration. Meanwhile, are you subscribed onto this channel? If not, kindly go ahead and subscribe to the channel for wonderful and regular content. Tap the subscribe button on your screen right now. Click the subscribe button on your screen right now to subscribe to this channel. If you have subscribed to the channel previously, thank you very much for staying tuned. On this channel, I have playlists along my four areas of contributions to knowledge. You can see playlists on all my videos on sociology, playlist on all my videos on research, playlist on all my videos on relationship, playlist of all my videos on migration. So you can view my videos all along the playlist to be updated, to catch up. So this video today is within sociology. Thus, the title of this video is Urbanization and Labor Migration. Urbanization and labor migration. These two key issues are very related, and they're very important for understanding urban processes. We want to understand how places become more urbanized. How can we manage urban systems more effectively within the confine of urban governance? And labor migration is also very profound in this century. For us to be able to manage urban centers more effectively, to be able to govern migration of labor more effectively, we must understand the relationship between urbanization and labor migration. There's a strong relationship between the two. Urbanization pushes, influences labor migration. Labor migration pushes and influences urbanization. So there's a strong relationship between the two. You cannot understand urban societies effectively, and you cannot govern urban societies effectively without understanding labor migration. And you cannot understand labor migration effectively or govern labor migration effectively without understanding the flip side of urbanization. So these two are very important, and this is very important because the world is increasingly very urbanized. Now we talk about mega cities, we talk about smart cities, we talk about resilient cities. This shows that people are moving increasingly to urban centers. They're moving from rural areas to urban centers. They're even moving internationally to urban centers. And according to data from the United Nations, people are increasingly moving towards urban centers. In 2018, 55%. 55% of global population, lived in cities, urban centers. But there's a projection that by 2030, as much as 60% of global populations will live in cities. And by 2050, this will move substantially, even beyond this, to 80% or even more. And urban centers continue to experience profound challenges as much as they are experiencing opportunities. So for us to be able to understand this and better manage human relationship and human behavior for sustainable development, it is very important for us to understand the relationship between urbanization and labor migration. And this is very important, whether the migration is internal or external. Now, what is urbanization? Urbanization is a process. Don't forget, it's a process. It's not a destination. It's not a noun. It's not a stagnated situation. It's a process. It's a continuous happening. And it evolves. It's very dynamic. So, urbanization is a process of a place becoming more complex in terms of relationship, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of population explosion. So it's a process of a place, a location becoming more complex, more heterogeneous, becoming more urbanized, accentuation, complexity, aggressive urban emergence. So once a place becomes increasingly urbanized, we say it's experiencing urbanization in a continuous form. So, and how do you define a place as urban to the extent that you can say, okay, this place is becoming more urbanized? You can look at the economic system, you can look at government presence, you can look at the geography, you can look at the nature of social relation, you can look at availability of modern infrastructure, population explosion, industrialization. So once you see all of this emerging forcefully towards in a place, we say the place is becoming increasingly urbanized. Meanwhile, I will recommend two videos, for you on this my channel along this area. There's a video on what is urban sociology and what is the relevance of urban sociology. That's a video. There's another video on urban inequality. You need to view this video. There's another video on urban social class. Those three videos, they're on this channel. Check my playlist of sociology. You will see them there. They will assist you to understand this video on urbanization and labor migration. So you describe a place as urban if the mainstay of the economy is not agriculture, if it's industrial processes, if you have essential government presence, maybe government hospitals and the rest of it, local government or state headquarters, this also is another measure. Geography, urban centers are usually around the center of town, city centers where people are concentrated. Then again, in social relations, which is important to sociologists, is that urban relationships are more ephemeral, more transient, more organic, more temporal. If you look at the framework of Emile Durkheim, talk about mechanical solidarity and organic solidarity. So urban social relationships are more organic, more based on more rationality and individuality. You can also see the work of Ferdinand Tonis in his Gemeinschaft and Gesellschaft dichotomy. If you look at all of this, so social relations in urban centers are different from rural areas that are essentially very based on kinship network and very mechanically fused. But in urban centers, though you have kinship systems in urban centers, you will have more of social networks, social relations. These are relationships that are not based on marriage and they're not based on blood. So in the urban center, you have a mix of social networks and which is based on neighborliness or neighborhood or occupation or religious association, all that relationship. So it's more transient, it's more based on rationality and capitalistic tendencies. So while you have kinship system in urban center, it's not the most predominant determinant of social relations, unlike in rural areas. You also have urban centers being significantly populated by modern infrastructures, skyscrapers. That's why you talk about smart cities, where you use essential technologies to power things. When you have a lot of modern infrastructural concentrations, this is another measure of urban centers. Then population. Urban centers have heterogeneous population in terms of composition. People of different ethnic group, different background, different rights, are there. Then you also have large population size. But this differs from country to country and whether developed country or underdeveloped countries. Some countries, their population measure may be 5%, 5,000 people, 20,000 people, 50,000 people, 100,000 people. So where you have this large number of people, we consider them urban compared to rural areas where you have few, people living there and homogeneous people. So we use population threshold depending on the country and the level of development. That's what will determine the population benchmark to be used. Industrialization is a major measure of urbanization or urban status compared to rural areas that are essentially based more on agriculture, but urban centers are based more on industrialization. And this is very relevant to us because labor movement, labor migration is moderated heavily, is determined, it caused heavily because of employment opportunities. That's what we talk about labor. Labor migrates towards economic opportunities where employments are available. So these industrial processes, industrial opportunities are major drivers, major attraction in terms of pull factors of people to urban centers. And as they move, labor moves towards urban center economic opportunities. They create a lot of a lot of opportunities. So that will take me to the next thing I want to talk about, causes of urbanization. We talk about, large migration of people, increasing migration. People move, whether internationally. When people move internationally, we call it immigration or emigration out, immigration in. If they move locally within a country, we call it in-migration. They have moved in. Out migration, they have moved out. So increasing migration is a major cause of increasing urbanization. Then you have natural increase, where you have low death rate and high birth rate. So and people are dying less now. People are not dying as much. Death rates are reducing all over the world because of advancement in health, technology, advancement of information. People now, even on social media, you can even know how to better manage your health. So unlike the information that you used to go and see consultant for many years ago, now you can even have them on social media. So you take preventive medicine rather than curative medicine. So death rate is increasing, and death rates are decreasing. Birth rate in some countries, especially in poor countries, increasing. But there are countries where death rate is increasing, birth rate is decreasing. Death rates are decreasing, birth rates are decreasing. They have what they call aged population. They are not giving birth, yet they are not dying. So the population, has increased significantly. And the population there remains, is decreasing, in a way, because you need to give birth for population to increase. But here, people are not dying, yet they are not giving birth. But because death has reduced, but people are still dying in any way, because when they grow old to a certain extent, people must die. So you now have people, their population is decreasing significantly, because some people don't even give birth anymore, especially if you go to Scandinavian countries, and many other countries. Some give just birth to one child, and others are dying on the account of age. What will happen to that population? The population will be reducing in a way, because except you give birth more than death, the population will increase. But when you have birth, very little, death in a way that is more sustained in terms of kind of age, dying, then the population will reduce. That's the logic. And that's why many countries abroad are attracting young people abroad to be able to populate their economic opportunities. Because in poor countries, birth rate is still very high. They're still giving birth because maybe they're not using contraceptives, or they have cultural elements or belief systems that believe in pronatalist, culture, in a way that even their population policies do not discourage birth, unlike in some countries. So in some poor countries, you have population explosion, or what we call youth bulge, because death rate is not sufficient, it's decreasing gradually, but birth rate is still increasing in those points. So you have a lot of population explosion in some of these countries, Asia, in Africa, and the rest of them. And now, the important point here is the fact that as the population of some of these countries are increasing compared to where population is decreasing in developed countries, labor movement continues to move to a certain direction where there's concentration of development, because some of these countries do not have widespread democratized economic opportunities. The rural areas are not developed. You have concentration of development in urban centers. So yet the population is exploding. The youths are increasing in population. Don't forget the youth bulge, the democratic youth bulge, especially in Africa. And these young people have to work. So what do they need to do? They move to where there's work, labor migration. Some of them are skilled individual, well-educated, ambitious, and aggressive, wanting to sell their labor. What do? They move to the urban center where industries are. So what does this give us? This doesn't give us what I would call disadvantages of urbanization. Don't forget, so once this happens, I've talked about causes in terms of, the death rate and birth rate. The relationship gives you natural increase depending on whether you're talking about developed country or poor countries, where you have population explosion. and they move towards the urban centers. And you have industrialization too, industrialization and employment opportunities as part of causes of urbanization as people continue to move to those places. So this urbanization has two focus, like I said. You have the advantages and disadvantages of urbanization, in the sense that advantages brings infrastructure, because infrastructural concentration, industrialization, employment opportunities, high wages, and high technological opportunities, because you need technology to also power urban processing. But there are also disadvantages. As people continue to move to urban centers, you have problems with overstretched facilities, especially in poor countries, even in some developed countries. For example, if you look at central London, for example, you will find it even in New York, even in Sydney, even in Beijing. You see a lot of people coming to this place competing for little infrastructural facilities available, and that's why you have cost of living crisis, because you have too many people competing for little available resources and space. So you have overstretched facilities that also lead to many urban social problems. You have high crime rate, you have unemployment because you have too many people for little employment that's available. You talk about homelessness, destitution. I've done a video on how to avoid homelessness abroad in my migration playlist. You have overstretched facilities, you have overcrowding, you have rural depopulation, because rural people continue to move to urban centers because of neglect of rural areas, especially in poor countries. So you have this problem being in some of these places, and this is why, to be able to manage these disadvantages of urbanization and better govern urban areas, we have to understand the dynamics of this and the huge role that labor migration plays in all of this, especially as rural areas continue to be neglected, and disproportionate advantages in terms of concentration in urban centers, in terms of infrastructure. So you have labor then continue to migrate, in a way that continue to contribute to accentuating increase in urbanization. So what is labor migration? Labor migration talks about movement of people across definite boundaries, whether local boundaries or international boundaries, over an extended period of time for work, in search of work, or in search of employment opportunity or economic opportunity. So before we can say something is migration, it must involve crossing definite boundaries, whether international boundaries or local boundaries, and it must be an extended stay where the person is going, usually 6 months. It must be in search of work, employment, or economic opportunities before we say it is labor migration. That is the definition, and that is very important. And you see, this is very important for us to be able to manage human processes, especially for sustainable development. If you don't understand why people move, how they move, what they contribute to where they're going, and what they leave behind, it becomes a problem. And this is all very important for us to be able to manage this better. We have to also better manage our rural areas to stem this labor migration to the urban center. Because why they are leaving is because people believe the opportunities in rural areas are not significant enough to hold them down, especially the young people who still have the capacity to work. That's why if you look at many rural areas today, you find only old, tired, retired people. And many of them move from urban centers to rural areas to go and retire. Many of them have always been on the farm there. So it's very important for us to understand why they move. Where some also move because of social construction, thinking that urban centers will meet all their problems. So many abandon wealth in rural areas for scarcity in urban centers, because some of those opportunities are hyped. They are not so much there. The problems in urban centers are so much that if people are not prepared enough, they're going to just go to urban centers and suffer, while they have left some opportunities in their rural areas they didn't take. So this is very important. That's why we talk about, you can explain this urbanization and labor migration from the perspective of push and pull factors. What is pushing people to urban centers? Neglect of the rural areas. What is pulling them to urban centers? Opportunities in the urban centers, the infrastructure, the technology, the employment opportunity, industrialization, the technology, and the rest of them. They are pull factors, better health facilities, and the rest of them. So you can use push and pull factors model to explain increasing urbanization and labor migration. You can also use social action theory. I have social action theory on this channel. People move because they are rational beings. They have the meanings attached to their movement. They believe that once they move, they will be seen as successful, and their opportunities are there. It's attracting them, rationally to take rational action. Verse 10, according to Max Weber, meanings attached to that movement. Some people believe once they move to urban centers, they are seen to have been successful in terms of successful labor migration, even when that may not be true in the final analysis. So you can look at social action to explain this in terms of people take rational action as rational being, seeing the urban centers as the center of economic opportunities and gravity for development. And migration, labor migration can be permanent and can be temporary. Some move permanently and stay in urban centers finally, but it can be temporary. Some move to urban centers and move out again, depending on the outcome of their analysis of opportunities they have taken. So labor migration can be permanent and can be temporary. And this is very important. And there are advantages there. Labor can move freely, and you have free movement of skills, free movement of opportunity, and better pay when they move. But there are also problems of this labor migration. You have de-skilling of rural areas, depopulation of rural areas, and many people move and they have something to regret because of excessive concentration of the urban centers. That leads to destitution and some of the problems I've mentioned. And do we now say we should stop labor migration or we should stop urbanization processes? No. Let people move freely and sell their skills wherever they want. Whether they move locally or internationally to urban centers, no problem. People have the right to move. But it's for us, policy analysts and policy makers and development partners, to prepare these places. So at the time I was living in a country abroad, this country, very proactive. They discovered that people are already moving towards this rural area. People are already moving towards this place. People are moving from the rural to urban. They just opened up the road. They constructed a very big road to allow people to move. So that there can be infrastructural accommodation for them where they are going, and they can also travel easily. So we don't need to discourage urbanization. It has its own advantages, like I've shown, but we have to better manage urbanization so that ghettos don't develop there and problems don't overwhelm those urban centers. And we must also develop rural areas to keep people there, because there are opportunities in rural areas too. So this is very important. So urbanization process can be positive, can also be negative. Labor migration can be positive, can be negative, but we have to better manage these two processes, like I've shown in this video. I hope you enjoyed this video. I enjoyed it myself. Kindly click subscribe, tap subscribe, and share the video as widely as possible. Till I see you in my next video, thank you very much.